The massive chamber stretched 3 miles across, filled with delegates from every corner of the galaxy. Beings with scales, fur, and skin of every color sat in floating pods that circled the central speaking platform. This was the Galactic Council, the governing body that controlled trade, war, and peace across 73 different worlds. Ambassador Kell adjusted his breathing apparatus and shuffled through the datapad in his clawed hands. The Zephyrian had been attending these meetings for over 30 years, and the routine never changed. Species reports, trade disputes, territory claims, and the endless paperwork that kept the galaxy running. His yellow eyes scanned the list of classified worlds. Primitive species that were not ready for contact filled page after page. Most had been surveyed once and then forgotten. Some were still throwing rocks at each other. Others had barely discovered fire. A few had managed basic spaceflight, but were too busy fighting themselves to be worth the Council's time. Earth appeared on page 40-7. Kell barely glanced at it. The blue planet had been marked as Do Not Contact for over 400 years. The survey team had filed their report and moved on. Humans were violent, backward, and stuck on their single world. They spent more time killing each other than advancing their technology. The Council had bigger problems to worry about. Next item, Speaker Thane announced from the central platform. His voice boomed across the chamber through translation devices. The Krillian Empire requests permission to expand mining operations in the Outer Rim. Kell sighed and put away his datapad. It's the same arguments, the same politics, the same endless debates. Earth and its primitive humans were the last thing on anyone's mind. But 3,000 light-years away, on a mining station orbiting a dead planet in the Kepler system, Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead and powered down his drilling equipment. The shift was finally over. Jake looked human enough. Brown hair, green eyes, average height and build. Nothing special about him except for the fact that he was supposed to be impossible. According to every official record in the galaxy, his species was trapped on a single world, fighting with chemical rockets and barely capable of reaching their own moon. The other workers on the station knew him as Jake from Kepler 7, lost colony world that had been cut off from the main settlements during a pirate raid decades ago. It was a common enough story. The galaxy was vast, and sometimes ships crashed or colonies were abandoned. Jake had learned long ago that nobody asked too many questions if you kept your head down and did your job. Good work today, Jake said. Velik, the station commander. The Thraxian stood 8 feet tall with gray skin and arms like tree trunks. You pulled more crystal ore than anyone else on Shift 3? Jake nodded and headed for the showers. He had learned to pace himself, too. Not work too hard or too fast. Showing up the alien workers would only draw attention, and attention was the last thing he wanted. The mining station housed 200 beings from a dozen different species. Most were here because they had nowhere else to go. Some were running from the law. Others were just trying to make enough credits to buy passage to somewhere better. Jake fit right in with the collection of misfits and outcasts. He shared quarters with a Balerian named Ku, a small blue creature who spent most of his time complaining about the food, the work, and the lack of entertainment on the station. Ku had been working the mines for 15 years and had never asked Jake a single personal question. It was perfect. Another day, another handful of credits, Ku said as Jake entered their small room. I heard the Krillians hit another freight convoy last week. Pirates are getting bold. Jake grunted and began cleaning his equipment.
The Krillian.
Pirates had been active in this sector for months. Most species considered them a minor annoyance. Raiders who picked off isolated ships and stations for quick profit. The Council sent patrol ships occasionally, but the Outer Rim was too big to police effectively. Station defense is a joke, Ku continued. 2 old fighters and a cargo hauler with gun mounts. If the pirates ever decide to hit us, we're dead. Jake said nothing. He had seen the station's defenses when he arrived 2 years ago. The Thraxian commander was a good soldier, but he was working with outdated equipment and a crew that had never seen real combat. If pirates came, most of the workers would panic and run. It was the smart thing to do. But Jake had never been good at running. 3 days later, the alarm started screaming. Jake was in the mess hall eating dinner when the lights flashed red. and the station's PA system crackled to life. "All workers to emergency stations," Commander Valak's voice boomed through the speakers. "This is not a drill. Raider ships approaching. Prepare for possible evacuation." Panic spread through the mess hall like wildfire. Beings of every species dropped their food and ran for the escape pods. Some grabbed personal belongings, others just ran. Within minutes, Jake was almost alone in the large room. Through the viewing ports, he could see 3 ships approaching. They were small and fast, painted black with red markings. Krillian raiders, just like Ku had predicted. The station's 2 defense fighters launched to intercept, but Jake could already see how this would end. The raiders had better ships, better weapons, and more experience. The first fighter exploded in a ball of flame. The second tried to run, but was cut down before it could escape. The raider ships moved toward the station like sharks closing in. On wounded prey, most of the workers had reached the escape pods by now. Jake could hear them launching, carrying civilians away from the coming battle. Commander Valak and his security team would make a stand. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. Jake Morrison finished his dinner and walked calmly toward the weapons locker. After 400 years of hiding, it was time to remind the galaxy what humans could really do. The weapons locker door hissed open as Jake entered his security code. Commander Valak had given all senior workers access in case of emergency, but Jake doubted the Thraxi and expected anyone to actually use it. Most species in the galaxy preferred to run from trouble rather than fight it. Jake pulled out a plasma rifle and checked its charge. Full power. He grabbed 2 spare energy cells and a combat knife, then sealed the locker behind him. The station shook as the raider ships opened. Fire on the outer hull. They were trying to punch through to the docking bays. The main corridor was empty, except for a few stragglers running toward the escape pods. Jake moved in the opposite direction, toward the central hub where the pirates would try to board. Footsteps echoed in the metal hallway as emergency lights flashed red overhead. Commander
Alec
and his security team had set up a defensive position at the main intersection. The Thraxian was barking orders at his 6 guards, all different species, but none of them trained soldiers, or miners and mechanics who had been given weapons and told to hold the line. "Jake, what are you doing here?" Belloc demanded as the human approached. "You should be in an escape pod." "Figured you could use the help," Jake replied, checking the sight on his rifle. Before Velok could respond, the station shook again. This time the sound was different, metal grinding against metal. The raiders had attached boarding tubes to the hull and were cutting their way inside. "They will come through 3 access points," Velok said, pointing to a map on his datapad. "We cannot cover them all with so few people." Jake studied the layout. The 3 entrances formed a triangle around the station's central core. Basic military tactics said the defenders should fall back to a single choke point and make the attackers come to them. But Jake could see a better way. "Give me 2 of your people and cover the main entrance," he told Velok. "I will handle the other to access points." The Thraxian stared at him. "Cannot cover 2 positions at once. That is impossible." "Trust me," Jake said. Velok hesitated, then nodded. He was out of options and running out of time. He assigned 2 guards to follow Jake, while the rest prepared to defend the main corridor. Jake led his small team through the service tunnels that ran between the station's outer hull and inner chambers. The 2 guards, a nervous Balerian and a young Zephyrian, struggled to keep up as Jake moved through the narrow passages with practiced ease. The first boarding tube was attached to Cargo Bay 7. Jake could hear the raiders cutting through the hull with plasma torches. He positioned the Balerian guard at the corner of the hallway and gave him simple instructions. "When they come through, count to 5 and then open fire. Do not try to hit them. Just make noise and keep them busy." The guard looked confused but nodded. Jake and the Zephyrian moved to the second access point at Cargo Bay 12. The cutting sounds were louder here. The raiders would break through any moment. Jake handed the Zephyrian his spare energy cells and pointed to a maintenance shaft above the bay doors. "Get up there and wait for my signal." The young alien climbed into the shaft just as the hull gave way with a loud crash. Krillian raiders dropped through the opening, their black armor gleaming under the emergency lights. They carried heavy weapons and moved like experienced soldiers. Jake waited in the shadows as the raiders spread out to secure the bay. Krillians were dangerous fighters, with tough hide and natural aggression that made them perfect pirates. They had been raiding the Outer Rim for decades, and few species could match them in close combat, but they had never fought a human. The lead raider stepped past Jake's hiding spot. Jake moved like a striking snake, the combat knife sliding between the armor plates at the alien's neck. The Krillian dropped without a sound. The second raider turned at the noise, raising his weapon. Jake was already moving, using the first raider's body as a shield. The plasma bolt meant for Jake burned into his dead teammate instead. Jake's rifle fired once, the energy beam punching through the raider's chest armor. The third and fourth raiders opened fire together, but Jake had anticipated their move. He rolled behind a stack of cargo containers as plasma bolts scorched the air above his head. The Zephyrian in the maintenance shaft fired down at the raiders, forcing them to take cover. Jake circled around the cargo containers, moving silently on the metal deck. The raiders were focused on the threat above them and never saw him coming. 2 quick shots ended the fight. All clear, Jake called to the Zephyrian. The young guard dropped from the shaft, staring at the 4 dead raiders. How did you do that? Krillians are supposed to be unstoppable in close combat. Jake did not answer. He was already moving toward Cargo Bay 7. The sound of weapons fire told him the other raider team had broken through. The Balerian guard was pinned down behind an overturned table, plasma bolts flying over his head. 6 raiders had made it through the hull breach and were advancing down the corridor. The small blue alien was doing his best, but he was outgunned and terrified. Jake climbed into the ventilation system above the corridor. The raiders were focused on the guard ahead of them and never looked up. Jake dropped behind the last 2 raiders, his knife finding vital spots before they could react. The remaining 4 raiders spun around. But Jake was already gone, vanishing into the maze of cargo containers that filled the bay. The Krillians fired wildly, their plasma bolts lighting up the darkness. Jake picked them off one by one, using the containers for cover and striking from unexpected angles. His movements were calculated and precise, wasting no motion or ammunition. Each shot found its target. Each step was placed with purpose. When the last raider fell, silence returned to the station. Commander Velik found Jake cleaning his rifle in Cargo Bay 7, surrounded by the bodies of 10 Krillian raiders. The Thraxians' eyes were wide with shock. The main boarding group retreated when they heard the fighting stop. Velik said slowly, "They are gone." Jake nodded and shouldered his weapon. "Good. That saves us some trouble." "Jake," the commander said carefully, "what exactly are you?" For the first time in 2 years, Jake Morrison smiled. "It's just a guy from Earth, Commander. Just a guy from Earth." Velik stared at him for a long moment, then activated his personal communicator. He had calls to make, reports to file, and questions that needed answers. The galaxy was about to learn that they had made a very big mistake about humans. Agent Syra Kane stepped off the transport ship and looked around the mining station. The Vorthan intelligence officer had seen many facilities like this one during her 20 years of service. But something felt different here. The workers who passed her in the corridors moved with purpose, instead of the usual defeated shuffle of Outer Rim laborers. Commander Velik met her at the docking bay. The massive Thraxian looked tired, as if he had not slept well in days. "Agent Kane, thank you for coming so quickly," he said, leading her through the station corridors. "I was not sure the Council would take my report seriously. A single individual defeating 10 Krillian raiders is not something we ignore," Syra replied. "Where is this Jake Morrison now?" Working a shift in the lower mines. "He has acted as if nothing happened since the attack 3 weeks ago." Syra nodded. Balak's report twice during the journey here. According to the security footage, one human had systematically eliminated an entire raider boarding party using tactics that would impress veteran soldiers. The problem was that humans were not supposed to be capable of such things. "I want to see the security recordings first," she said. Velik led her to his office and activated the holographic display. The footage showed the corridors during the attack, with timestamp codes running in the corner. Syra watched as Jake Morrison moved through the station like a predator hunting prey. "Pause it there," she said when Jake appeared on screen. "The image?" froze with Jake crouched behind cargo containers, his weapon ready. Cyrus studied his posture, his grip on the rifle, the way he positioned himself for maximum cover in fields of fire. "This is professional military training," she said quietly. "Advanced combat tactics. Where did a primitive human learn to fight like this?" "That is what I want to know," Velik replied. "Jake claims he is from Kepler 7, a lost colony." "Dunt." "I checked the records. Kepler 7 was abandoned 50 years ago after a plague outbreak. No survivors." Syra felt a chill run down her spine. She had investigated dozens of anomalies during her career, usually finding simple explanations. This felt different. "You confronted him about the lie." "No, I thought it best to wait for Council Intelligence to handle the questioning." "Smart move," Syra thought. If Jake Morrison was hiding something significant, it was better to approach carefully. She spent the next 2 hours reviewing all available data on the human. Work records, medical scans, personal interactions with other workers. Everything seemed normal except for the combat footage. "I want to observe him first before making contact," she decided. "Show me where he works." The lower mind stretched, deep into the asteroid that housed the station. Jake Morrison was operating a heavy drilling unit, extracting rare crystals from the rock face. Other workers gave him space, partly out of respect and partly out of fear after what had happened. With the raiders, Syra watched from the observation deck as Jake worked. His movements were efficient and practiced, but she noticed things that others might miss. The way he constantly scanned his surroundings, how he positioned himself near exits and cover points, the subtle way he kept track of everyone else in the area. These were the habits of someone who had been trained for combat and survival. They were so natural that Jake probably did not even realize he was doing them. After his shift ended, Asfera followed Jake to the mess hall. She sat 3 tables away and listened to his conversations with other workers. He spoke little, mostly responding to direct questions with short answers. He avoided talking about his past and skillfully redirected conversations to other topics. That evening, Syra made her move. She approached Jake as he was leaving the mess hall. "Jake Morrison," she said, showing her Council Intelligence badge. "I need to speak with you." Jake looked at the badge without surprise. "I wondered when someone would show up." He found a quiet corner in one of the unused storage bays. Syra activated a privacy field generator to prevent eavesdropping. "The story about Kepler 7 is a lie," she said directly. "We both know that. The question is why you are lying and what you are really hiding." Jake sat down on a cargo crate and studied her face.
"And you are Vorson?"
"Intelligence service. Probably been doing this job for 15 or 20 years. I've seen a lot of strange things in the galaxy, but this one has you worried. Answer the question." "Which question?" "You have not asked the right one yet." Syra felt her patience wearing thin. "Fine, what are you really, Jake Morrison?" Jake smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. "I am exactly what I appear to be. A human from Earth. The problem is that your people have some very wrong ideas about what that means. Earth is classified as a primitive world. Humans are barely capable of spaceflight. According to who? The survey team that visited us 400 years ago." The question hit Syra like a physical blow. She had assumed the Earth classification was current, but when was the last time anyone had actually checked? "You were saying the classification is outdated?" "I'm saying your people saw what they expected to see and then never looked again." Jake stood up and walked to the small viewing port in the storage bay. "Do you know how many humans are working in the galaxy right now, Agent Kane? That is impossible. Earth is quarantined. Earth is ignored. There is a difference." Jake turned back to face her. "We have been out here for over 2 centuries. It's engineers, pilots, soldiers, scientists. We keep quiet, use false identities, and do our jobs. Nobody asks too many questions in the Outer Rim." Syra felt the foundations of her worldview cracking. "How many? Thousands? Maybe tens of thousands by now. We are scattered across hundreds of worlds, working for dozens of different organizations. Some of us are in positions you would find very surprising. This is impossible. Yet the Council monitors all space-capable species. The Council monitors the species they know about. We learned a long time ago that sometimes it is better to be underestimated." Reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It looked like a standard communicator, but Syra could see modifications that spoke of advanced technology. "I could contact my superiors right now," Jake said. "Tell them that the secret is out, and we need to make some decisions. Or we could keep talking and maybe find a way to handle this quietly." "Your superiors? Did you think I was alone out here?" "There are protocols for situations like this. Chain of command. Standard operating procedures." Syra stared at the device in Jake's hand. Everything she thought she knew about human capabilities was wrong. The implications were staggering. "What do you want?" "Same thing we have always wanted. To be left alone, to live our lives in peace. But if that is not possible anymore, then we need to have a very different conversation." Jake activated the communicator. "Control, this is Morrison. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. Request instructions." The reply came immediately, in clear English. "Understood, Morrison. Stand by for contact protocols. Help is on the way." Syra realized that the galaxy was about to change in ways that nobody could predict. The ship appeared without warning on the edge of the Kepler system. One moment the sensors showed empty space, and the next a massive vessel was moving toward the mining station. It was sleek and angular, built with materials that reflected the light of distant stars like polished metal. Commander Velik stared at his displays in shock. His sensors could barely track the approaching ship, and his computers could not identify its design or origin. Whoever built it had technology that was decades ahead of anything in the Council database. "Unknown vessel, this is Kepler mining station," he broadcast on all frequencies. "Please identify yourself and state your intentions." The reply came in perfect Galactic standard, but with an accent that Velik had never heard before. "Kepler Station, this is Admiral Lisa Grant of the Terran Space Force. Request permission to dock. We are here to collect one of our people." Terran. Velik had never heard of any species called Terrans. He checked his computer but found no records of such a civilization. The ship continued its approach, ignoring his weapon systems and defense platforms as if they were toys. "Admiral Grant, I have no record of your species in Council databases. Please explain your authority in this system." "Commander, I suggest you contact Agent Syra Kane. She will explain the situation." Velik activated his internal communication system. "Agent Kane to the command center. Emergency." Syra arrived within minutes, followed by Jake Morrison. The human looked calm and unsurprised by the massive ship now filling their viewing screens. "Agent Kane, do you know anything about this vessel?" Velik demanded. "More than I wish I did," Syra replied grimly. "Commander, I recommend you grant docking permission. We are not equipped to refuse it anyway." Jake stepped forward and activated the communication system. "Admiral Grant, this is Morrison. Permission to come aboard." "Granted." "Jake Bay 3 is prepared for your arrival. Agent Kane is welcome to join us if she wishes to continue this conversation." 30 minutes later, Syra found herself in the docking bay of the most advanced ship she had ever seen. The corridors were clean and efficient, with technology that seemed to blend function and beauty in ways that Council designers had never achieved. The crew members they passed looked human, but Syra was beginning to understand that human capabilities had been badly underestimated. These people moved with confidence and purpose that spoke of a mature civilization. Admiral Lisa Grant met them in a conference room that overlooked the mining station through massive viewing windows. She was a tall woman with gray hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. Her uniform was simple but well-made, with insignia that suggested decades of military service. "Agent Kane, thank you for agreeing to this meeting," Admiral Grant said as they sat down. "I understand you have questions about recent events." "Recent events?" Syra repeated. "You mean the fact that humans are not the primitive species we thought they were?" "That would be one way to put it." Admiral Grant activated a holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy. Red dots appeared across the image, scattered through dozens of systems. Each of those dots represents a human settlement or facility. "We have been expanding quietly for over 200 years." Syra counted the dots. There were hundreds of them, spread across territory that included several council member worlds. "This is impossible." we would have detected such expansion. Your people have been looking for chemical rockets and radio signals. We stopped using those technologies 3 centuries ago. Jake spoke up from his seat. Admiral Agent Kane has been cooperative. She deserves to understand the full situation. Admiral. Grant nodded. Very well. Agent Kane, what do you know about human history? Your survey report indicates a species divided by conflicts, with limited technology and no unified government. That report was filed 412 years ago. Do you know what humans have accomplished in that time? Asira shook her head. We unified our world within 50 years of your survey. We developed faster than light travel within a century. We established our first colony worlds 200 years ago. We have been members of galactic civilization longer than some of your current council species. The holographic display changed to show ship designs, city layouts, and technological specifications. Everything was clearly human in origin, but the technology rivaled anything Syra had seen from advanced council civilizations.
Yes.
Why the secrecy? She asked. Why not reveal yourselves and request council membership? Admiral Grant and Jake exchanged glances. Because we learned from watching you, the Admiral said. We saw how the council treats new species. The politics, the restrictions, the assumption that older civilizations know better than younger ones. We also saw how you treat species that might be threats, Jake added. The Keth were quarantined for being too aggressive. The Yalan were restricted after they developed advanced weapons. We decided it was safer to remain unknown until we were strong enough to negotiate as equals. Syra felt a chill. Are you threatening the council? We are explaining our position, Admiral Grant said calmly. Humanity has no interest in conquest or domination. We simply want to exist in peace and pursue our own development. We will not be controlled or restricted by civilizations that ignored us for centuries. The holographic display showed a new image. It was Earth, but not the primitive world described in council records. Cities of glass and metal stretched across the continents. Orbital stations ringed the planet like jewels. Ships moved between Earth and its moon in steady streams of traffic. This is Earth today, Admiral Grant said. Population 12 billion. Capital of the Terran Federation. Home to universities, research centers, and manufacturing facilities that supply human colonies across the galaxy. Syra stared at the image. The Council will never accept this. They will demand explanations, investigations, restrictions. Which is why we preferred to remain hidden, Jake said. Why that choice has been taken from us. Admiral Grant stood up and walked to the viewing window. Below them, the mining station looked tiny and fragile against the bulk of her ship. Agent Kane, you have a choice to make. You can report this conversation to the Council and trigger a confrontation that nobody wants. Or you can help us find a way to resolve this situation peacefully. Syra looked at the two humans. Everything about this situation violated her training and her understanding of how the galaxy worked. But she could see the logic in their position. What do you propose? A formal meeting. Council representatives and human delegates. Neutral territory. Full disclosure on both sides. The Council will demand proof of your capabilities. Admiral Grant smiled. We are prepared to provide demonstrations. But Agent Kane, you should understand that once this process begins, there will be no going back. The galaxy is about to learn that humanity is not what they thought we were. Jake activated his communicator again. Control, this is Morrison. Phase 1 is complete. Request permission to proceed to Phase 2. The reply came immediately. Permission granted. All units are standing by. Syra realized that this conversation had been planned long before she arrived at the mining station. The humans had been preparing for this moment for years, perhaps decades. How long have you been planning this? She asked. Since the day we first left Earth, Admiral Grant replied. We always knew that eventually we would have to reveal ourselves. We just wanted to choose the time and circumstances. Outside the viewing window, more ships began to appear in the darkness of space. Human ships, all of them bearing the same sleek design and advanced technology. The mining station was now surrounded by a fleet that had materialized from nowhere. Syra. counted 12 vessels, each one larger and more sophisticated than anything in the Council Navy. Is this a show of force, Admiral? It is a demonstration of capability. The Council needs to understand that humanity is not a minor power seeking admission to their club. We are a civilization that has earned the right to be treated as equals. Galaxy was about to experience the biggest political shock in its recorded history. The Council chamber had never seen anything like this before. Representatives from 73 species sat in stunned silence as the holographic displays showed human fleet movements across the galaxy. What had started as a routine emergency session had become the most important meeting in galactic history. Speaker. Thane struggled to maintain order as delegates shouted questions and demands. The Zephyrian ambassador Kel was on his feet, his yellow eyes wide with disbelief. The Krillian war chief was demanding immediate military action. The Vorthan science minister was frantically taking notes on the human technology displays. Order. Order! Thane called, his voice booming through the translation systems. We will proceed with the scheduled demonstration. 3 days had passed since Agent Syra Kane's report reached the Council. 3 days of emergency meetings, heated debates, and frantic research into human capabilities. The decision to allow a formal test of human claims had passed by a narrow vote, but only because the alternative was military confrontation with an unknown force. Captain, Alex Turner stood alone on the central platform, surrounded by thousands of hostile alien faces. He wore a simple blue uniform, with minimal decorations, but his presence commanded attention. The human had arrived on a ship that had bypassed every Council defense system, as if they did not exist. Honorable delegates, Alex said, his voice calm and clear. I understand your concerns about recent revelations. Humanity requests the opportunity to demonstrate our capabilities and earn recognition as an equal member of galactic civilization. You have deceived us for centuries, Ambassador, Kel accused. Why should we trust anything you say now? Because deception was our only option for survival, Alex replied. Your own records show what happens to species that reveal advanced capabilities too early. The Keth were quarantined. The Yilan were restricted. We chose a different path. First test was technological. Council engineers had prepared a series of problems that had puzzled the galaxy's greatest minds for decades. Power generation, faster-than-light communication, and resource extraction challenges that required breakthrough solutions. Alex approached the first display, which showed a failing planetary energy grid. The system was collapsing under the demands of a growing population, and traditional fusion reactors could not provide enough power. Dozens of species had attempted solutions, all failing due to fundamental limitations in current technology. The problem is not power generation, Alex said after studying the display for less than 5 minutes. The problem is energy distribution. You are trying to force more power through an inefficient network. He activated his portable computer and began sketching modifications to the planetary grid. His solution involved quantum distribution nodes that could route power instantly across any distance without loss. The concept was so elegant that several Council scientists immediately began taking detailed notes. This is impossible, the Thraxian chief engineer protested. Quantum entanglement cannot be used for power transmission. It's not with your current understanding of quantum mechanics, Alex agreed. But you are missing 3 fundamental principles that make it practical. He spent 20 minutes explaining the theoretical foundations of his solution. The Council scientists asked increasingly complex questions, trying to find flaws in the human's logic. Alex answered each one with mathematical precision and clear examples. The second test was military strategy. The Council presented Alex with a tactical simulation that had been used to train their best officers for over a century. The scenario involved defending a key system against overwhelming enemy forces. Using limited resources, every species had developed their own approach to the problem. The Krillians favored direct assault. The Zephyrians preferred defensive positions. The Thraxians relied on superior firepower. All of these strategies resulted in heavy casualties and uncertain outcomes. Alex studied the simulation for 10 minutes, then implemented a solution that no one had ever considered. Instead of trying to defeat the enemy fleet directly, he used the system's natural resources to create a series of traps and diversions. Asteroid fields became kinetic weapons. Gas giant atmospheres became shields. The enemy fleet was systematically dismantled without ever engaging the defending forces directly. Brilliant, whispered General Corax of the Thraxian Defense Force. We have been thinking like conquerors, when we should have been thinking like survivors. The third test was diplomatic negotiation. The Council presented a trade dispute that had raged for 50 years between three different species. Multiple mediators had failed to find a solution that satisfied all parties. Economic sanctions and military threats had only made the situation worse. Alex listened to all three sides present their cases, asking occasional questions, but mostly observing. He paid attention not just to what they said, but how they said it. Body language, vocal patterns, and cultural references that revealed underlying motivations. The real dispute is not about trade routes, he announced after 2 hours of testimony. It is about respect and recognition. Each of your species feels ignored by the others. His solution addressed the emotional needs behind the economic demands. Trade routes would be shared equally, but more importantly, each species would have rotating responsibility for system security. They would work together instead of competing against each other. You are giving them all what they want without actually giving them what they asked for, observed Ambassador Kell. I am giving them what they need, Alex corrected. Asked for would have continued the conflict. The final test was the hardest. The Council had prepared a scenario that combined all previous challenges into a single, impossible situation. A colony world was dying from environmental collapse. Population was trapped between warring factions. Traditional solutions had failed, and time was running out. Alex approached this test differently. Instead of trying to solve the immediate crisis, he traced the problem back to its root causes. The environmental collapse was caused by industrial practices imposed by off-world corporations. The warring factions were fighting over resources that had been artificially limited by trade restrictions. His solution required changing the fundamental relationship between the colony and the galactic economy. Local control of resources, sustainable industrial practices, and a new trade agreement that benefited the colonists instead of exploiting them. This will require convincing dozens of powerful corporations to abandon profitable operations. The Vorthan Trade Minister pointed out. Yes, it will, Alex agreed. But the alternative is watching an entire world die slowly while we profit from their suffering. The chamber fell silent. Every test had been passed, not just with technical competence, but with innovative thinking. That surpassed the Council's best efforts. The human had demonstrated capabilities in engineering, military strategy, diplomacy, and ethical reasoning that matched or exceeded any member species. Speaker Thane called for a recess to allow delegates to discuss what they had witnessed. As the representatives filed out in small groups, Alex remained on the central platform, waiting calmly for their decision. Ambassador Kell approached him during the break. Your solutions are impressive, but they require trust and cooperation that may not exist in the real galaxy. Then perhaps it is time to build that trust, Alex replied. Humanity has been preparing for this conversation for 2 centuries. We are ready to be part of something greater than ourselves. The vote would come soon, and with it, the decision that would reshape galactic civilization forever. 6 months had changed everything. The vote in the council chamber had been closer than anyone expected, but humanity had won recognition by a margin of 3 votes. Now President Maria Santos stood in the same chamber where her species had been judged, but this time she was speaking as an equal. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. Human ships now docked openly at council stations. Human engineers worked alongside alien scientists on projects that benefited the entire galaxy. Human diplomats sat in planning sessions that would have been impossible just months ago. But the biggest change was happening on Earth itself. The massive viewing screens in the council chambers showed the blue planet that had been ignored for so long. Cities of glass and metal stretched across the continents, connected by transportation networks that moved millions of people every day. Orbital elevators reached into space like silver threads, carrying cargo and passengers to the dozen. Space stations that ringed the world. Honorable delegates, President Santos began, her voice carrying across the chamber through translation systems that now included human languages. 6 months ago, you learned that humanity had been hiding among you. Today, I want to share what we have learned from you. The president was a woman in her 50s, with silver hair and eyes that had seen decades of political struggle. She had been elected to lead humanity through this historic transition, and her words would be remembered for generations. We have spent centuries watching the council from the shadows. We saw your successes and your failures. We learned from your mistakes and built upon your achievements. But most importantly, we learned that no species can face the challenges of the galaxy alone. Behind her, the viewing screens showed images from across human space. Colony worlds, where humans and aliens worked together. Research stations, where different species shared knowledge. Trading posts where goods flowed freely between civilizations that had never trusted each other before. Ambassador Kell watched from his floating pod, still struggling to accept how completely wrong his people had been about humanity. The Zephyrian had spent weeks reviewing historical records, trying to understand how such a massive deception had been possible. The answer was both simple and disturbing. They had seen what they expected to see and never looked deeper. It's the galaxy faces challenges that require new thinking, President Santos continued. Climate collapse on industrial worlds, resource shortages in growing systems, conflicts between species that have raged for centuries. These problems cannot be solved by any single civilization, no matter how advanced. She activated a holographic display that showed a joint human council project. It was a massive terraforming effort on a dead world in the Outer Rim, using technology and techniques that combined the best ideas from dozens of species. This is New Haven, she explained, a world that was lifeless rock 5 years ago. Today, it supports a population of 2 million beings from 15 different species. They work together, live together, and build something greater than any of them could achieve alone. The image changed to show the planet's surface. Cities had been designed to accommodate different environmental needs. Atmospheric processors created breathable air for multiple species. Agricultural zones produced food that could sustain diverse biological requirements. This is what becomes possible when we stop seeing each other as threats and start seeing each other as partners. General Korax of the Thraxian Defense Force had been one of the strongest opponents of human recognition. The old warrior had spent decades preparing for conflicts with unknown enemies, never imagining that the greatest unknown had been working alongside his own people. Now he found himself nodding in agreement with the human president's words. The final images showed Earth's capital city of New Geneva, where the new Terran Federation government was based. But the most striking thing about the images was not the impressive architecture or advanced technology. It was the diversity of beings walking the streets together. Humans and aliens shared sidewalks, workplaces, and public spaces with an ease that would have been impossible just months ago. Children of different species played together in parks. Scientists collaborated in laboratories. Artists created works that blended cultural traditions from across the galaxy. We do not hold grudges, President Santos said, her words echoing. Through the vast chamber, the council made decisions based on the information they had at the time. We chose secrecy over contact, and both sides missed opportunities for cooperation. But we also do not forget the lessons we have learned. Speaker Thane called for the final ceremonial vote. The question was no longer whether humanity would be recognized as equals. That battle had been won months ago. This vote would determine humanity's role in the Council's future. The motion before us is to grant the Terran Federation permanent membership on the Executive Board, with full voting rights and security clearance for all classified projects. The debate that followed was brief but intense. Some delegates worried about giving too much power to a civilization that had hidden from them for centuries. Others argued that humanity's demonstrated capabilities and innovative thinking made them valuable partners. When the votes were counted, the result was overwhelming. 70 votes in favor, 3 abstentions, and no votes against. President Santos smiled as she accepted the formal recognition. Humanity is ready to take its place among the stars, not as junior partners, but as equals committed to building a better future for all species. The ceremony concluded with the raising of Earth's flag alongside the banners of 73 other worlds. But the real celebration was happening across the galaxy as humans emerged from hiding and took their places in galactic society. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the mining station where everything had started. The facility had been converted into a training center where humans and aliens learned to work together. Commander Velik had been promoted to oversee the program, and the old soldier seemed to enjoy his new role as much as his previous command. "Hard to believe it all started with a pirate raid," Velik said, joining Jake at the viewing windows. "It started long before that," Jake replied. "We have been preparing for this moment for 2 centuries. The pirate raid just gave us an excuse to stop hiding." Through the windows, they could see ships from dozens of worlds docked at the station. Humans worked alongside aliens on projects that would have been impossible just months ago. The age of secrecy was over, but the age of cooperation was just beginning. Agent Sarah Kane had been reassigned to head the new Human Integration Department, tasked with helping both sides adjust to the new reality. Her final report on the Morrison incident had become required reading at the Intelligence Academy. Case study in how assumptions could blind even trained observers to obvious truths. The galaxy was vast. It's full of wonders and dangers that no single species could face alone. But for the first time in centuries, humanity would meet those challenges with their true strength revealed. The Quiet Ones had finally spoken, and their words would reshape the future of galactic civilization.